Welcome back. As you can see, it is time for Top Story. And here in France, the wheels of government are starting to turn slowly after the traditional long summer break. Later this Monday at the presidential palace here in Paris, President François Hollande will make his yearly address to the Foreign Diplomatic Corps. Now, given foreign policy, apart from the country's relationship with Europe, was far being a large part of Hollande's election campaign. There will be much interest to see what the new leader has to say. For more on this, I'm joined by International Affairs Editor Annette Young. She's got her crystal ball out. Annette.
I'm trying.
You're trying.
You know,
telepathy
is one of my strongest strengths, I must say.
It has been said.
No.
But why is there need for such an event to actually be held as this?
Well, Stuart, most countries at some point will have their leaders sit down with the Foreign Diplomatic Corps. It's a standard stock practice, you know, in terms of global diplomacy. But of course, in France's case, it's very important to remind the world of their own presence on the stage, that they are indeed, or still view themselves as a beacon. Of course, at the moment, it's the rotating head of the Security Council and also plays a very crucial role in NATO. Of course, there are some who would argue that its influence has somewhat waned, especially when it comes to Europe these days. It's clear that Germany is very much dictating the policy, primarily because the German economy is still very strong, by contrast to France, which of course has got problems with its deficit, high unemployment, and of course in recent months had its credit rating downgraded. Now, still, many of those ambassadors are going to appreciate the opportunity of having an up-close and personal time with President Hollande. They want to know what, in fact, will be the government's priorities. They will not want to know his take on Syria, how he sees Afghanistan post-2014, and of course we've had those dreadful bit of news coming out today of those Afghan troops and foreign troops being killed. How they're going, you know, what will be his take on Tehran as it continues to pursue its contentious nuclear program, and what are the French going to do, for example, with those Islamists who've seized control of northern Mali. Now, the reality is, when you look at the foreign policies of both the socialists and the predecessor, the UMP government, which of course was led by Nicolas Sarkozy, there's not that much difference. In fact, there's minimal difference, if anything, between those two, except for the fact that Hollande obviously withdrew the French troops earlier out of Afghanistan. And certainly it's not much difference between the former Foreign Minister Alain Juppé and his successor Laurent Fabius. But what is different is the style. And we're talking about style over substance. And it's a reflection, no doubt, of Hollande's own personal style, which is very low-key, very cautious, by contrast to Sarkozy, who is very much get in there, get involved, you know, roll up his sleeves, much to the frustration, and I know this for a fact, of whoever was occupying the foreign ministry at the time, because the foreign minister's position rather at the time, because, you know, they were having to sort of work with the president and follow his agenda as opposed to pursuing their own.
I'm not always that sure what he was going to say exactly. I mean, you mentioned some of the issues that might come up today. Which are the ones do you think that Hollande is really going to want to tackle and put at the forefront?
Well, I want to talk about Syria in a second, because I think that clearly is the newsy one. But it's interesting, I mean, what is on the agenda, because not only is it just this speech, it's a 2-day conference for these ambassadors, and it's very much looking at the agenda, very much dominated by economics. Quelle surprise. The reality is that France is very worried about its own economic strength. I mean, how can you be out there on the world stage trumpeting yourself as a global presence if you've got serious economic issues to deal with, and certainly when you're competing with emerging world powers like China, Brazil and India. Local press have been reporting that Laurent Fabius, the Foreign Minister, will be talking about this very much in his speech. He'll be very much looking at ways of boosting French enterprise at a global level. Of course, Hollande's going to be talking about Europe and the need to work closely with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Of course, the two are still very much finding their feet in terms of working out some sort of working relationship, but Greece is going to be the next test for those two.
Okay, and as you mentioned Syria, there's kind of little chance, isn't there, of a kind of Libya-style campaign. So what can France actually do?
Well, France at the moment, as I was saying, is the rotating head of the Security Council, and Sarkozy did grab the headlines earlier this month by saying Hollande had been asleep at the wheel when it came to Syria. Now, you know, Hollande in response says, no, we're dealing with this in a very cautious manner. And what is interesting, that international momentum for a limited military intervention is starting to gather some speed. France last last week signalled that it was willing to participate in a limited no-fly zone and suggested for the first time that the operation could be mounted without reference to the UN Security Council and, of course, the dreaded Russia and Chinese veto, which, of course, has been blocking any movement on that front. So no doubt there'll be some discussion about that. But, of course, a reminder, this Thursday, France is hosting that very important conference on Syria in New York at a ministerial level, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
OK, Annette, thank you very much. Annette Young from our International Affairs Desk. And, of course, we will be covering that story throughout the day here on France 24, so stay tuned for more on that. That's all for now. Sport coming up and then the news.